Greetings and welcome to yet another enthralling video. Today, we will learn more about the evolution of human beings and the early society. We will discuss first about the Paleolithic Age, which is also referred to as the Old Stone Age, and the first period of the prehistory of mankind.
To begin, it is crucial to understand that prehistory is divided into three time stages, namely the Paleolithic, Neolithic, and Bronze Age.
The early civilization emerged during the Paleolithic era, which lasted until 8,000 years before the birth of Christ.
People lived as nomads throughout the Paleolithic period, which meant that they were always on the road in quest of wildlife to hunt. Given that they were hunters and gatherers, they had to track the animals in order to capture them while also collecting wild fruits found along the road.
They inhabited small, family-based tribes and sought safety in caves as well as in foothills of mountains, preferably near riverbanks since it supplied them with both water and food in case of animals that goes there to satiate their thirst. In caves, mankind paints on the surface of the walls using water, charcoal, soil, and animal fat. Each painting shows their daily survival routines such as their hunting methods and tactics for hunting large animals like bison and reindeer.
Several religious practices were also formed during the Paleolithic Age. When one perished, they began to worship their ancestors and bury their bodies with tools and food so that they can travel to the hereafter in peace. Moreover, they are also terrified of natural occurrences like thunder and lightning. Aside from the idea that the sun rises in the east, they couldn't comprehend concepts like rising sun and setting sun. For them, the sun provides warm temperature, while the moon provides serenity and coolness.
As a way of clothing, Paleolithic men and women wore animal skins and wrapped it around their bodies. They often chewed the animal skins to soften it and make it more flexible to wear. Moreover, they employed tools such as an axe and spears that they themselves crafted out of stones, wood, and bones as their primary means of hunting.
That concludes the Old Age or Paleolithic Age. To sum it all up, the Paleolithic era relied on hunting, animal skins, and fossil for survival. They live in caves and places near rivers and paint on the walls of the caves to preserve their history.
Turn to the origins of modern man. Discover the Neanderthals who thrived in the face of frigid cold and mortal danger for 100,000 years, only to die out as the final step in man's evolution was about to begin. About 40,000 years ago, our ancestors took their first tenuous steps into an unknown land. After centuries of bitter cold, the last glaciers were finally in retreat from Europe. And it was here, in a gradually warming world, that the earliest people would settle the landscape and begin the story of modern humanity. Fire was used not only for heat, but for preparing food and undoubtedly as a protective barrier against wild animals. But in some instances, it also provided a more unusual function.
Just like fire, the use of tools was also important to early humans. These tools were known as microliths. The early humans used these tools to hunt, defend themselves, or to build shelter.
The Neolithic Age. This was the final stage of cultural evolution or technological development among prehistoric humans, the beginning of agriculture. Witnessed the first agriculture and domestication of animals, along with advancements in tools and weapons. It was an important period of change in which humans began cultivating plants, breeding animals for food, and forming permanent settlements. The Earth entered a warming trend around 14,000 years ago at the end of the last ice age. Some scientists theorize that climate changes drove agricultural revolution.
Although farming tools are much different from tools used for hunting, they still needed to be sharp. These new civilizations that arose had to protect themselves from others and from the attacks of wild animals. New tools with dual purposes emerged during the Neolithic Age to clear fields for planting and to dig into the soil. Their tools and weapons would have been made by hand, which was time-consuming and painstaking. For these reasons, weapons had to be tools and tools had to be weapons. Due to the fact that humans were largely dependent on cultivated crops, domestication of plants and animals was the next step in the development of civilization. More importantly, the transition to a sedentary way of life indicated the fact that humans considered it unreasonable to travel from one land to another, doing hunting and gathering. Therefore, the most historians are inclined to believe that the Neolithic Revolution is strongly associated with domestication as a result of convergence of cultural development and climate changes. The reasonable place for early domestication of animals is closely associated with the development of the Near Eastern civilizations. In particular, the process involved the wild forms of cattle, goats, and sheep.
Now let's proceed to the beginnings of community life. The word community can actually be defined differently in different contexts. However, in sociology and social sciences, we define a community as a group that follows a social structure within a society, such as its culture, norms, values, and status. They may work together to organize social life within a particular place, or they may be found by a sense of belonging sustained across time and space. However, what we consider as communities today are actually quite different to how they looked like and operated in ancient times. Let's take a look at the beginnings of community life.
Community life began around 60,000 BC when early men started living together, forming community groups due to an epidemic. That is where community life has begun. Man is called a social animal. Man cannot live without a society or a community. The community provides security and support to everyone. And community life begins due to human nature and our necessity to enjoy living in a community. To fulfill the needs, requirements, and necessities of each other, humans live together and extend mutual cooperation. This is how community life begins.
Various groups decided on their own method of choosing a leader. The leader was more often the oldest person in the group, and sometimes they could be the strongest person in the community. The leader looked after law and order of the settlement. If a dispute arose between any two members of the group, the leader would act as the mediator. Gradually, these settlements became even larger, which led to the establishment of various civilizations.
So, the Indus Valley Civilization was first discovered during excavation campaign under Sir John Hubert Marshall in 1921 to 1922 at Harappa, following the discovery of seals by J. Fleet.
Next is the Indus Valley Civilization on when it was created. So the Indus Valley Civilization was a cultural and political entity which flourished in the northern region of the Indian subcontinent between 7000 to 600 BCE. The Indus Valley Civilization is often separated into three phases. So the early Harappan phase was beginning from 3300 to 2600 BCE. Next is the mature Harappan phase from 2600 to 1900 BCE and the late Harappan phase from 1900 to 1300 BCE. So the Indus Valley civilization began to decline around 18,000 BCE. So in this sense, archaeological evidence indicates that trade with Mesopotamia, located largely in modern Iraq, seemed to have ended. The advanced drainage system and baths of the great cities were built over or blocked. Writing began to disappear, and the standardized weights and measures used for trade and taxation fell out of use. So why the Indus Valley civilization declined and fell is unknown. But scholars believe it may have had to do with climate change, the drying up of the Sarvati River, an alteration in the path of the monsoon which watered crops, overpopulation of the cities, a decline in trade with Egypt and Mesopotamia, or a combination of any of the above. In the present day, excavations continue at many of the sites found thus far, and some future may provide more information on the history and decline of the culture.
Indus Valley Civilization. What are the important things happen in Indus Valley Civilization? So the important innovations of this civilization include standardized weights and measures, steel carving, and metallurgy with copper, bronze, lead, and tin. Little is understood about the Indus script, and as a result, little is known about the Indus River Valley civilization's institutions and systems of governance, which was a major part of the Indus Valley. So the Harappan civilization was located in the Indus River Valley. Its two large cities, Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro, were located in present-day Pakistan's Punjab and Sindh provinces respectively. Its extent reached as far as south as the Gulf of Kambat and as far east as the Yamuna-Jumna River. So the main characteristic of the Indus Valley civilization is the people of the Indus Valley civilization were hygienic. They were well-planned drainage systems, dustbins made of bricks, and a great bath. Archaeologists have found that there are no temples in Indus Valley, but the people used to worship ox and trees like pipal.
Earth assumed the status of a mother figure, which provided food for all living beings, her children. The sun gave life and warmth. It was also reassuring after the dark night. It was the same for the moon, stars, and rain. People started worshipping them. They started sacrificial rites and sang songs in praise of these natural objects. There were magic practitioners who claimed they could prevent people from coming to harm by them. Some individuals decided to perform sacrificial rites and pray for the community. Such persons came to be known as the priests. Neolithic people worshipped the sun, the moon, and the natural elements on which their harvest and sustenance depended. The idea of fertility developed among them and grew into a cult, and female fertility was associated with it. Women became responsible for the abundance of harvests because they knew the mystery of creation. The connection between humans and gods was made by priestesses. In order to appease the gods, these sacred women performed various rites which applied to individual families, clans, and the whole tribe.
They developed religious beliefs during the late Neolithic, led to the appearance of the first cult constructions, sanctuaries. The temples were arranged so as to represent an earthly projection of the myth of the divine space, the sky being the center where lived the main deities. The abode of the priests, the intermediaries of the deities in the village, was also in the center. This is how a sacred place was formed, sanctified by rituals and prayers, in which the connection with superhuman beings took place. That is why the territory around the sanctuary was not chosen for construction. Living there was only considered worthy for the gods and their divine intermediaries, the priest. The development of cults and rituals before the late Neolithic led to the appearance of various ritual items and sacred signs. They later became the basis of writing, symbols with which time was measured and marked. Excavations revealed clay tiles with signs, scale models of homes, tables, chairs, and utensils. These items were sacred and were used during various ceremonies.
The spiritual life of the late Neolithic society was shaped and controlled by the representatives of the priestly class. It periodically organized and performed cult rituals held mainly in the temple. Priests established the spiritual connection of the ancient people with their gods, which was a prerequisite for a high social status. In this way, over time, some priests gained considerable power and later became tribal leaders. An eloquent example of a king priest is the burial in the Varna Catholic necropolis. All indicates that he was the bearer of the religious and secular power of his people, as evidenced by the various artifacts found. You can see a wax figure of the king priest from the Varna Catholic necropolis and its symbols of power and prestige in the historical park. Various votive figures and household items in the restored homes from the Neolithic era will help you feel more fully the spirit of the era and experience an exciting adventure becoming part of the most ancient historical period of the Bulgarian lands.
The Iron Age wasn't a single time period that occurred around the world. It followed the Bronze Age and lasted from around 1200 to 500 BCE. The Iron Age refers to a time when people in a particular location learned to use iron for tools and weapons, as well as when they started using iron more than other metals. That said, the Iron Age civilizations are still considered prehistoric because most didn't keep detailed records of their history. In most circumstances, these societies passed through 3 ages of technology, starting with the Stone Age, and then the Bronze Age, and finally, the Iron Age. True to its name, the Iron Age's main characteristic involved iron. In most regions, the primary metal for making tools was bronze, an alloy composed of copper and tin. It's likely bronze would have remained dominant in Western civilization if it hadn't been so rare. A big advantage with iron was that you only need one metal, which is much easier to get than copper or tin. To be able to mold metals, people melted them in ovens, heating them up to very high temperatures. Molten liquid metal was poured into molds, forming the desired shapes to create different tools, utensils, and weapons. This process is known as metallurgy. Thanks to metallurgy, the crafting trades started to bloom in older inventions like the wheel and the carriage. It even led to the creation of the first sailing boat. Due to this change in progress, the trading of goods started to develop. Cities were growing, and people started changing their lifestyles. Other major changes, such as more advanced art and agricultural practices, changing religious beliefs, and more advanced systems of writing using alphabetic characters also occurred during this period. The Age of Metal ended with the invention of writing. This is when the great ancient civilizations started emerging.